Everybody, I just enjoyed finishing marking your assignments. Generally things were well done and most people are getting a hang of the content, which is fantastic. But there were a couple of common mistakes that I thought it was worth pointing out. So I won't go through the whole assignment, I'll just go through common errors. So the first common error I wanted to talk about was in this first question. Okay, and that was the following. People were doing this, they were taking this 3 plus 2 squared, and they were saying, okay, well that's the same as 3 squared plus 2 squared equals 9 plus 4 equals 11. But that's not actually correct. Because if we do our BIDMAS, or our BIMDAS, we have to deal with our brackets first. So we've got our 3 plus 2 squared is actually the same as 5 squared, which is 25, not 11. So that was the first mistake that was quite common. The next thing was, just a really quick one, question 3. A lot of people, when they did this question, when they simplified it, so it was just collecting like terms, so it was 3x minus 2x was 1x equals 1x, and 4 plus 7 is plus 11, and a lot of people left it like that. But just the maths convention is the following. If we've got a 1 in front, we usually don't say we've got 1x, we just say we've got x. So this isn't wrong, that was marked correct, but you know, that's the best way to do it, and especially when the question says simplify. So that's that one. Okay, the next thing was question 3 part C. In fact, both of these questions. I'll just use this. I'll use part B. And this was another convention that I'll just tell you about. And that is that, so again, this was collecting like terms. So we had those two ones together, and they made 8x squared. And then we had, a lot of people did this. A lot of people said, we've got y's, so we've got 8 y's, and then we've got 5 and a negative 2, so that's plus 3. And then we've got, what else we got? And then we've got negative 4y squared. So that's correct. But the convention, again, is to list in order of highest to lowest power. So the correct answer would be 8x squared minus 4y squared plus 8y plus 3. So they're both correct, but this one's just more in line with convention, to list in order of highest to lowest power. When I talk about power, I'm talking about these things here. Great. Next thing, question 4, part A. This one. Okay, for this one, so most people did the first part correct, which was just to say, well, it's the same as saying 5 and m is 2 and n is negative 6, so that's 5 times 2 is 10 over negative 12, and then so we can divide both top and bottom by 2, and we've got 5 over negative 6. And again, this was another convention. So we're just helping you with the grammar of mathematics here. We usually put the negative in front of the top number. So negative sign in front of top number. So that was the key point there. Again, correct, but this one's just more in line with convention. What was next? Page 5 didn't have too many common errors. Aha! Question 7, the dreaded question 7. Some people did really well with this. Quite a few people had a bit of a struggle. That's okay. Doing word problems is going to take a bit of time to get used to, but I thought I'd do it for you guys here. So, Martin spends 1.5 hours training for an upcoming footy match. He jogs at 8 kilometers per hour, and he turns around and walks back to his starting point at 3 kilometers per hour. How long does he spend walking? How long does he spend running? So, let's draw a picture. We've got Martin in his footy shorts, and he starts off here, and he's going to run, or he's going to jog, and then he's going to walk back. Walk. So what's the same? Well, the distance in both cases, and different. The speed's going to be different at 8 kilometers kilometers per hour versus 3 kilometers per hour. And the other thing that's going to be different is going to be the time. But we know that adds to 1.5 hours. Okay, so we've drawn a picture. Now we can think about, I like to think about units. So distance has units of kilometers. Speed has kilometers per hour, or you could also write kilometers per hour, kilometers divided by hours, and time is hours. I know you guys have also, it's been suggested to you guys that you draw a table. So we're just kind of organizing our information a bit more here. So a table could look something like this. We might have a couple of lines. And we might have speed, time, distance, jog, walk. So the speed we jog at is 8. When we walk, it's 3 kilometers per hour. Our time, if we call this t, then this is going to have to be 1.5 minus t. And now what about in distance? Well, we can actually generalize this distance and say that, well, we know that the distance equals speed times time. Now I'm going to kind of explain that briefly. If this confuses you, don't worry too much about it, but it might help it click for some people. So if we've got speed times time equals distance, we can actually look at the units and say, well, speed is kilometers per hour, time is hours, and distance equals kilometers. So when we multiply this side, we get, cancel those, and we got kilometers times kilometers. So that's called unit analysis, and that can help you kind of get your head around what needs to be multiplied by what, or what needs to be divided by what. As I said, if that didn't make sense, don't worry about it, but if it did make sense, hopefully it helped out. So our distance is going to be our speed times our time. So this one's going to be 8t, and this one's going to be 3 times 1.5 hours minus t. How do we get this 1.5 minus t? Well, we know that all up he spends 1.5 hours training. And if he spends t minutes going this way, then how much time has he got left? Well, 1.5 hours minus t minutes to travel back. 8 kilometers per hour, t mins. Here we've got 3 kilometers per hour, 1.5 minus t mins. Okay, so, and we know that these two things are equal because the distance here equals the distance here. So what we can do is we can actually go like this. We can equate these two things. We can put them on opposite sides of the equal sign. 8t equals 3 times 1.5 minus t. And that is to say, distance jogged equals distance walked. That's all I've done here. I've said the distance jogged is equal to the distance walked. Okay, and then we just need to do our algebra. This needs to multiply by this. 3 times 1.5 is 4.5. 3 times negative t is negative 3t. Add 3t to both sides. We've got 11t equals 4.5. Divide both sides by 11. And we end up with t equals 4.5 over 11. And from there, we could use our calculator. And therefore, jogging time equals, and if we use our calculator, we find that 4.5 over 11 equals 0.41 hours. I'm sorry, I was making a mistake before. I was talking about minutes here. This should have been hours. I apologize for that. Our units are hours. And therefore, walking time equals 1.5 minus 0.41. Because we've got this time here, 1.5 minus t. T is 0.41. So the walking time is 1.5 minus t, which is 1.5 minus 0.41 equals 1.09 hours. So that was how we did that problem. Some of you might have been able to see it easily, some of you may not have, but I kind of used a few different approaches, from drawing a picture, using a table, to essentially derive this key equation that let us work out the problem. Probably the trickiest thing there was calling this time, this walking time, 1.5 minus t. That was probably the trickiest thing in that question. Okay, what was the next thing I wanted to talk about? The next thing was question 8, part B. So in question 8, we had this equation, and we were asked to, in part B, we were asked to transpose it to make D the subject. Okay, so many of you did a great job. A equals pi d squared on 4. You recognize the first thing to do to get d by itself was to multiply both sides by 4. 4a equals pi d squared. Then many recognize that the next thing to do would be to divide by both sides by pi. 4a on pi equals d squared. And then many of you recognize that the next step is to square root both sides. Sorry about the noise. Just close the window. Okay, So this is where the key mistake came. There was two things that people wrote. They either wrote 4a, they either wrote this or this. What's the difference? Well, in one case, we're only square rooting the top, and in the other case, we're square rooting the whole side. Which one's correct? This one is correct. This one is incorrect. So we need to be square rooting the whole side. Another clear way you can represent that is to write it like this: 4a on pi in brackets square rooted. And that makes it clear, but it's also fine just to have it like this, as long as your square root sign goes straight down there. And I was able to see which people actually may have written. Some people wrote a bit ambiguously and wrote something like this. So it's hard to see if they meant to include the whole thing. But in the next question, where we were meant to use that equation, that d equals 4a on pi square root of, and sub in some values to find that d equals 9 meters, I could see the people who were only square rooting the top compared to the people who were square rooting the whole thing, because the people who were square rooting the whole thing got the correct answer, and the people who didn't square root the whole thing would have made a mistake. So that was the key. That was the key for that question. Just making sure you square root the whole side. So we're doing the same to both sides, and we're square rooting the whole side. Okay, the next thing is question 9. Now, for this one, solve the following equation. So most people did the following. They labeled this 1 and this 2. And then a lot of people said, let equation 3 equal equation 1 times 3. So they came up with this, like 2x times 3 is 6x minus 2y times 3 is 6y equals 22 times 3 is 66. And they called that 3. And then they said something like subtract 3 from 2. And so they had 6x plus 8y equals negative 4. And then they took away 6x minus 6y equals 66. And then they went like this. Okay, so what that is 6x, take away 6x is 0 minus, then we've got 8y minus 6y is 2y. And then they had something like, this negative 4 plus 66 would be something along the lines of 62. And they went, okay, y is 31. Ba-bong. What we had to do was take away the whole of this. So what we need to do was say 6x plus 8y equals negative 4. And this is an easy mistake to make. It's pretty understandable. But what we need to do is actually, instead of just taking away the first term, we needed to use brackets and take away this whole thing. So what it actually becomes is 6x plus 8y equals negative 4, added on to negative 6x. This negative multiplies through this to turn this into a positive 6y equals, and this negative affects this as well, and we've got negative 66. And then we can work forwards. Then we can say, okay, well that's 6x minus 6, and 6x and minus negative 6x, should I say, is 0. 8y and 6y is 14y. And negative 4 and negative 66 is negative 70. And that would give us the correct answer then of y equals negative 5. And then most people knew to sub that back in. So just if you are doing this, if subtracting, you have to subtract every term. To take away every term, take away that term, take away that term. So it's 8y minus negative y. Negative 4 minus 66, instead of just taking away the first term and then kind of adding from there on. We are nearing the end. Oh, I think that was all the key points I wanted to share with you guys. So, well done. Hopefully that helped. And good luck with your continued study. If you have any further questions, please let me know on the discussion forums. See you later.